One of the biggest setbacks to sending astronauts into space is the cost. Until recently, booster rockets were not reusable and were destroyed after every launch. Elon Musk understood that if we were to ever get serious about colonizing Mars, something had to be done about the cost. Thus, reusable rocket boosters were born. But Elon was not the first person to test out this technology. As you're about to discover, plenty of other companies and organizations have been testing landing rockets as early as the 1960s. And as you can imagine, there were plenty of tests that did not go as planned. From Neil Armstrong to SpaceX, here are 5 rocket landings that went horribly wrong. Neil Armstrong is without a doubt one of the most famous Americans to ever live. He was the first man on the moon and gave us the iconic phrase, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." However, he wasn't ready to go to the moon overnight. A lot of training had to be done, and it was during one of these training exercises that Armstrong faced disaster head-on. On May 6th of 1968, Neil Armstrong was the backup commander for the Apollo 9 mission. Part of his training included practicing a simulated lunar landing at Ellington Air Force Base. At first, everything was going according to plan. However, after being airborne for about 5 minutes, he began to lose control. In the video, you see the experimental vessel suddenly tilt to the side. With only seconds to act, he decided to eject before the vessel came crashing down. Now, while this may not technically be a rocket landing, it was here that rocket landing technology really began. And this is far too interesting of a story to ignore. Luckily, Armstrong did not suffer any injuries from the incident, and a year later, he was able to man the actual mission to the moon. An investigation into why the vessel didn't react properly showed that the crash occurred due to a loss of helium pressure, which caused a depletion of the hydrogen peroxide needed for the reserve altitude thrusters. Engineers had to correct this issue before flights could resume several months later. The actual lunar landing was one of the most difficult aspects of the moon landing mission, but they managed to figure it out, making history in the process. Now, let's fast forward to the early 1990s, when McDonnell Douglas began developing a prototype reusable launch vehicle named the Delta Clipper. The program ran from 1991 to 1995. McDonnell Douglas was first in partnership with the U.S. Department of Defense before switching to NASA in 1994. On July 31st of 1996, the Clipper Graham went up into the sky for the last time. The flight itself only lasted a mere 140 seconds as the experimental vessel climbed 4,100 feet into the sky. However, on its descent, only 3 of the 4 legs deployed. The Clipper Graham then shut off its engines and tipped over.
Landing small negative. Engine out.
She's coming over.
Okay, we had a gear that was not out.
Following the incident, NASA had to decide whether or not to go on with the program. Building a new Delta Clipper rocket would cost about $50 million, which was cheap by NASA standards. But due to budget constraints, they decided to scrap the program. Founded in 2002 by Elon Musk, SpaceX aimed to revolutionize space travel. They knew that in order to bring about a new era of space exploration, they had to develop a way to reduce the cost, and reusable booster rockets were clearly the way to go. By April of 2015, SpaceX was finally ready to land one of its flagship rockets, the Falcon 9. They originally planned on landing the rocket in January, but they had to delay it due to weather conditions. The booster was equipped with plenty of technology to help it land successfully, including landing legs and grid fins. It was a momentous occasion for SpaceX because if they were successful, then it would have been the first time in history that a rocket booster returned to our planet via a vertical landing. Unfortunately, it simply wasn't meant to be. On April 15th, SpaceX released a video of the terminal phase of the rocket descent, including its brief landing before it tipped over and exploded. Later, Musk went to Twitter to explain why the rocket landing failure had occurred. Apparently, the bipropellant valve became stuck. As a result, the control system could not react fast enough for the landing to be successful. Later in 2015, SpaceX finally achieved their mission with a successful Falcon 9 landing. It was an impressive feat, but as you're about to find out, they hadn't perfected the technology just yet. In January of 2016, SpaceX confirmed that they would try to bring about a controlled descent flight test and vertical landing of the Falcon 9's first stage on the floating platform called Just Read the Instructions. It was located about 200 miles away from the coast in the Pacific. This attempt came after the first successful landing and booster recovery of a previous launch that took place in December of 2015. However, roughly 9 minutes into the January flight, the live video feed cut out from the drone ship. It had lost its lock on the uplink satellite. In a report later given by Musk, the first stage did result in a touchdown that went smoothly. Unfortunately, a lockout on one of the 4 landing legs failed to deploy. This resulted in the booster once again falling over and exploding. Debris from the explosion arrived back on the coast on January 18th. This included several rocket engines attached to the structure's octaweb assembly. This just goes to show the amount of precision that goes into developing such advanced technology. Everything was going perfect, yet one small error caused the entire engine to go up in flames. Back in 2018, SpaceX was tasked with launching the Dragon capsule into space. The purpose of this voyage was to deliver supplies to the International Space Station, including festive meals for Christmas. However, when the rocket tried to come back in for a landing, the first stage booster missed its landing zone upon re-entry. That meant that it ended up in the sea a couple of kilometers away from its planned destination. According to reports, groans filled up SpaceX mission control as live video came in showing the rocket booster spinning out of control even when it was still fairly high up over Cape Canaveral. While the company had plenty of misfires landing rockets on sea barges, as we saw earlier, this was the company's first time missing a ground landing. A commentator from SpaceX called the landing failure a bummer. However, it was also noted that landing the rocket was secondary to actually getting it into space, which was successful. The reason for the crash had to do with the hydraulic pump for the landing fins. Apparently, it stalled, but the engines stabilized the booster just in time, allowing for the rocket to land intact, albeit in water. Now, after seeing all of these videos, you may be skeptical about the future of space exploration. How can we expect people to go to space when rocket technology seems to be so hit or miss? Well, worry not, because as you're about to learn, the future of space travel is rather bright. Failure is just as critical of a part in the scientific process as success. And through these failures, the organizations have grown and become even more confident in their abilities to successfully send people to space and land the boosters. SpaceX did not let any of its failures, including the ones in this video, set them back. They kept working to perfect the technology. Perhaps one of their most impressive feats came back in 2018 when they successfully landed twin Falcon Heavy rocket boosters side by side at the Kennedy Space Center. With every failure comes improvements and new successes. And with all that's happened in the last couple of years, from the Starship launch to India landing on the moon, I think it's safe to say we're about to enter a very exciting era of space exploration. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to click the link on screen and check out another just like it. As always, thank you all for watching, and we hope to see you in the next one.